My name is Frank Newton, and I come here today to pay my respects at the grave of Howard Brooks, a good soldier, a good man, and it is my privilege to tell you his story. Howard was born in 1812, and like most of his family in Virginia, the only life he could look forward to was being a slave. But in 1861, something wonderful happened. That something was the start of the war between the states. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what could be wonderful about a war? Well, let me tell you. When the South broke away from the Union, Mr. Lincoln could tell that there weren't no future for what he called a house divided. And he was right. But when the war began, things didn't go so well for the Union. And the president knew he had to do something to get the North back on the front foot. So he took a big gamble. In 1862, he said he was going to free the slaves. Well, none of us believed that was going to happen. But on New Year's Day, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation said that the Negro would be henceforth and forever free. What a celebration that must have caused for Howard and his people. And now finally, they had a chance to fight, this time as free men. And I would call that wonderful. Now, not everybody thought this was a good idea. A lot of whites said, we'll have an armed rebellion, we'll have two wars on our hands. Some blacks said, why should we fight for a country that don't treat us as equals? But when the word went out for black men to join the Union Army, so many of them volunteered they had to set up a whole new branch of the military just to deal with it. It was called the Bureau for Colored Troops, and by the end of the war, over 180,000 black men had enlisted. And this is where I come into Howard's story. See, I was already soldiering. I was in the 7th Kansas Cavalry. My brother and I had been farmers, so I knew how to wrangle horses, and so they made me a sergeant. But then the colored troops needed white men for officers, and so I signed up, and I was a captain, Company H, 29th United States Colored Infantry. Now, Howard, he had seen the recruiting posters everywhere saying, it's now or never, and fail now and our race is doomed. So in November of 1863, he joined my company. I was a 26-year-old captain. He was a 51-year-old private. Things was hard for the colored troops at first. Most of the officers only tolerated them so they'd have somebody to dig the latrines, bury the dead. But again, something wonderful happened. Down around Vicksburg, there was a little place on the Mississippi called Milliken's Bend. Johnny Reb was trying to break through the Union lines there, but a small group of heavily outnumbered colored troops held him off just long enough so that the Union warships could come and finish the job. It weren't much of a battle, really. It was more of a skirmish, but everyone was so impressed with how the colored troops had fought that from that moment, the black man was finally taken seriously as a real soldier. In 1864, the 29th went out east to protect the nation's capital. But pretty soon we was involved in the terrible siege at Petersburg. It was a hot July day, and Mr. Lincoln himself rode through the troops with Ulysses S. Grant. Lord, what a cheer went up for the president. Men were singing, crying, trying to touch his horse. I think I saw a tear in Mr. Lincoln's eye, too. It was a day. Little did any of us know that by sunup the next morning, so many of us would be dead. You see, there was this plan to tunnel under the rebel troops and to blow a big hole in their lines. But instead of breaching the defenses, The dynamite just blew a huge crater in the ground. And to make matters worse, when the orders come down to our company, we were sent in completely unprepared for what had happened. Those rebels just stood around the edge of the crater and they picked us off like fish in a barrel. I can't never forget the screams of men dying all around me. I don't remember how we got out of there, but we did make it back to safety. At least wise, it should have been safety. But some of the Union soldiers, they seen the colored troops coming back towards the lines. They thought they was running away, and so they opened fire on their own men. I guess they figured them for cowards. But I seen Howard and some of the other men, they went back into that hellhole. They were bringing water to their wounded comrades. They were picking up the flag and urging their brothers on in the fight. That don't seem like cowardice to me. Howard fought bravely in many battles after the crater, but none of them were that bad. Not that life got any easier. I mean, the conditions we lived in, Lord, I wouldn't do it to a dog. And we'd get lice in our hair and fleas in our clothes. We'd get bugs biting us all day, skeeters biting us all night. Didn't matter if it was mud or frozen solid. We slept on the ground. And our rations was mostly coffee and hardtack. We'd have to forage for roots and berries and even weeds like lamb's quarters that we would cook up in a kind of stew. And disease everywhere. Malaria, typhoid, dysentery. You know, sometimes the only thing that kept us going was that knowing however bad we had it, Johnny Reb had it a lot worse. When Lee surrendered at Appomattox, the 29th was sent out west to the Rio Grande. And one more wonderful thing happened. We were in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865, when the word came down that all the slaves was finally free. I looked at Howard, this brave man who had never flinched in the line of fire. He stood there with tears in his eyes. And who could blame him? We mustered out late 65. I went back to farming, this time in Nebraska. Howard, he come here to Madison, and he married Isabel. He got work as a laborer. After what he had suffered as a slave and a soldier, I guess that wasn't so bad. The hard part was getting his government pension for the time he was in the Army. I mean, Howard and Isabel, they tried for 25 years to get him his due. And it finally came through about 2 years before he died in 1892. Turned out he was one of the first colored soldiers to get a government pension. Yeah, we were quick enough to come and get him when we needed him. Not quite so quick to help him when he needed us. And that is why I'm here today, to pay my respects to Howard Brooks, a good soldier, a good man. And it has been my privilege to tell you his story.